Hi, this is your math coach, Howie Tutman, presenting What Math Should My First Grader Know? I've recorded videos in the four domains or groupings of standards in math for first grade. This video is the only video in the geometry grouping. The video is about distinguishing defining versus non-defining attributes, composing shapes, and partitioning circles and rectangles into 2 and 4 equal shares. If you have any questions or comments, please email me at hrtutman@gmail.com. The complete text of the three standards that this video is based upon follows at the end of the video. The geometry domain for first grade has three standards, and I'm going to present all three of these standards in this video. The first standard has students using what are called defining and non-defining attributes of shapes to identify, name, build, and draw shapes. Attributes are characteristics or traits, so the first graders are looking at the attributes of shapes. A shape has to have certain attributes to be called that shape. These are called their defining attributes. So let's take a look at an example. Here's a triangle. In order for this shape to be called a triangle, it has to be a closed figure. It has to have three straight sides and has to have three, what some of the first graders may call corners, or I prefer the mathematical term angles. So it's a closed figure with three straight sides and three angles. Now, non-defining attributes would be attributes that aren't a requirement of that shape. So for instance, this is a light green triangle. This is a purple triangle. This is a dark green triangle, but the color doesn't matter. These are all still triangles. Also, the size doesn't matter. Once again, they're all triangles. And one other non-defining attribute is the orientation or the direction that the shape is turned. So for instance, if I turn this triangle, this is still a triangle. It has three straight sides and it has three angles. Just because the top angle isn't oriented towards the top, it doesn't mean that it's no longer a triangle. And some first graders have difficulty understanding this, so we want to make sure that the first graders understand that orientation or the direction that a shape is turned doesn't matter. This would still be called a triangle. Pulling out another shape, this shape is a hexagon because it has six straight sides. That would be one of its defining attributes. It's yellow, but that's just one of its non-defining attributes. Also, let me change its orientation. This still is a hexagon. It has six straight sides. So this hexagon could be larger or it could be a different color, but it's still a hexagon. And here's a rectangle. Its defining attributes would be it has four straight sides. The sides opposite each other are of the same length, and it has four angles. Now, this is a red rectangle, but the color isn't a defining attribute. The color would be a non-defining attribute because we could have a rectangle that's orange. Also, size doesn't matter. The size doesn't make this a rectangle. So size and color would be non-defining attributes. And one last figure to look at, this would be a square. It would be defined as having four sides. All sides would be equal in length, and it has four angles. And once again, the color doesn't matter and the size doesn't matter. Those would be non-defining attributes. So students should be able to use their understanding of defining attributes to identify, name, and create by building or drawing the shapes that I've reviewed and any other 2D or 3D shapes that their teacher may have introduced them to. In the next standard, students create composite 2D and 3D shapes. Some of the components that students will use to compose or to make the two-dimensional shapes are rectangles, squares, trapezoids, triangles, and half circles. Students should be able to name the composite shape that they make, as well as to name the shapes that formed it. So for instance, here we have a half circle, and students should be able to create a full circle by putting two half circles together. So they should be able to name this as a half circle and a half circle, and together to be naming this as a circle. Here we have a square, and a student should be able to recognize that this square has been composed of putting two of these triangles together. Here I have two other types of triangles, and when I put these two triangles together, they form a rhombus. All four sides are equal in length, and the angles are not at right angles like a square would be, so these two triangles form a rhombus. Here I have a shape where these two sides are parallel to each other, so this is a trapezoid, and when I put it together with another trapezoid, this forms a six-sided figure, which we call a hexagon. So two trapezoids can form a hexagon. Here we have a rectangle, and when I put it together, I compose it with another rectangle. It forms another rectangle. This is just a larger rectangle. The opposite sides are the same length. All of the sides are not the same length. So this rectangle was simply formed by two smaller rectangles. And lastly, I'll show one more rectangle. And when we put it together with another rectangle, what we find is that our composite figure is now a square. All four sides are the same length, and this square is composed of two rectangles. So students should be able to create the composite shapes that we've looked at, as well as any other 2D or 3D shapes that their teacher may have introduced them to. The last geometry standard has the students partitioning or dividing circles and rectangles into 2 and 4 equal shares. So here we have a circle divided into two equal shares. Each of these shares is one half of the original whole. And we say that this is one half of the whole circle. When we divide this circle in half, the two shares are equal. They are both exactly one half of the circle. Now, sometimes, say this was a pizza and we divided it in half, we might hear a first grader say, "I'll take the bigger half." Well, if it's cut exactly in half, there's no such thing as a bigger half. There would be a bigger piece if one piece is bigger than the other, but if they're exactly the same size, each would represent one half of the pizza. And just one other point on this, these two halves are the exact same size because they came from the same hole. But let's say we had a larger circle, and when that larger circle is cut in half, half of that larger circle would not be equal to, to one half of this smaller circle. And with this yellow circle, instead of cutting the circle into 2 pieces, we've cut it into 4 pieces. So each one of these pieces would represent 1/4 of the entire circle. And one of the things we'd want our first grader to notice is that as we're cutting the circle into more pieces, the pieces get smaller. So when we cut the circle into 1/2, we had 2 equal pieces, and when we cut the circle into fourths, we had 4 equal pieces. And just like we did with circles, we'd want our first graders to recognize that we can do the same thing with rectangles. Here, this purple rectangle, I could cut this rectangle in half, and then I end up with 2 equal pieces, and each of these pieces represent 1/2 of the rectangle. And in this red rectangle, what I've done is I've cut this into 4 pieces, and these are 4 equal pieces, so each piece would represent 1/4 of the original rectangle. And just like with the circle, we'd want the first graders to recognize with the rectangle, as we cut the rectangle into more pieces, each of the pieces becomes smaller. If you're interested, here are the complete 3 standards that this geometry video is based upon. Distinguish between defining attributes, for example, triangles are closed and 3-sided, versus non-defining attributes, for example, color, orientation, overall size. For a wide variety of shapes, build and draw shapes to possess defining attributes. Compose 2-dimensional shapes, rectangles, squares, trapezoids, triangles, half circles, and quarter-circles, or 3-dimensional shapes, cubes, right rectangular prisms, right circular cones, and right circular cylinders to create a composite shape, and compose new shapes from the composite shape. Students do not need to learn formal names such as right rectangular prism. Partition circles and rectangles into 2 and 4 equal shares. Describe the shares using the words halves, fourths, and quarters, and use the phrases half of, fourth of, and quarter of. Describe the whole as 2 of or 4 of the shares. Understand for these examples that decomposing into more equal shares creates smaller shares.